Hello, this is Claudia. For the next hour, I'll be reading from the New York Times, May 27th edition, on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The wars in Ukraine and Iran are more alike than you may think. Aspects such as drone technology and diplomacy show how the wars intersect on the battlefield and in global alignments, providing a model for future conflicts. The trench warfare and heavy artillery on Ukraine's battlefields in 2022 don't look much like the war by air and sea that began when the United States and Israel attacked Iran. But similarities between the two conflicts soon became evident and remained so almost 3 months later. In both, the country with the more powerful military has been unable to vanquish its adversary. President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia expected a quick victory when he launched his special military operation more than 4 years ago. President Trump initially vowed that the little excursion against Iran, which started on February 28th, would last 4 to 5 weeks. For both Russia and for the United States, there's a lot of unmet expectations about their military operations, said Nicole Grajewski, an expert on Iran and Russia, and a professor at Sciences Po, the elite social sciences university in Paris, attributing it to the hubris on both sides. Over the last several days, negotiations have produced progress towards an initial plan for peace between Iran and the United States, though with much uncertainty, given the renewed American strikes against Iran on Monday. Whether or not an agreement is reached, the war will have provided lessons, along with the conflict in Ukraine, on the evolution of modern warfare. Technology reshaping warfare. Asymmetrical tactics have helped both Ukraine and Iran hold off stronger forces with which they could not compete in a conventional military confrontation. Iran, for instance, struck at the United States by attacking its allies. It instilled fear in Persian Gulf states by sending one-way attack drones to hit military bases and energy facilities in countries like Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. It has also used the threat of mines and small-armed speedboats to keep a chokehold on the narrow Strait of Hormuz. Ukraine has assassinated Russian military officers in Moscow and regularly struck oil facilities, the lifeblood of the Russian economy. It has also used sea drones to neutralize Russia's much bigger Black Sea Navy. Perhaps most indelibly, experts said the two conflicts demonstrate how innovation and technology are reshaping warfare. The United States has turned to drone detecting systems loaded with artificial intelligence to protect the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, according to a person familiar with the agreement. Those systems were developed by Ukraine to defend itself from Russia. In Lebanon, the militant group Hezbollah is attacking Israeli troops with explosive drones controlled by fiber optic cables, like those commonly used in the war in Ukraine. Layered systems of sensors, guided missiles, and drones, and in many cases AI-enabled technology that were honed in Ukraine and deployed in the Gulf are likely to rapidly proliferate around the world, said Michael Kaufman, a military expert and senior fellow in the Russia and Eurasia program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. In both wars, we see the advent of mass precision on the battlefield, Mr. Kaufman said. Already, he said, Hezbollah and combatants in Mali have turned to similarly cheap and easy-built technology, showing that such systems will democratize access to mass precision on the battlefield for middle and small powers. Similar attack strategies. The fighting in the Middle East before the ceasefire took effect in early April featured the kind of drone swarms combined with ballistic missile attacks that officials and experts said debuted in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Iran delivered one-way Shahed attack drones to Russia in 2022, which Moscow used to strike Ukraine. That same model has been launched against Gulf countries by Iran this year, as Russia is returning the favor with some military support to Iran. The extent of that support remains unclear, but according to U.S. officials, it includes shipping drone parts across the Caspian Sea. Ms. Krajewski noted some cooperation between Russia and Iran in manipulating global location systems to confuse the opposition's targeting guidance. Some ships linked to Iran appear to have recently spoofed locator trackers in the Strait of Hormuz, mirroring a long-honed tactic of Russia's illicit shadow fleet of energy tankers to evade detection by the U.S. Navy. Russian anti-jamming equipment was found in an Iranian drone targeting a British base in Cyprus in March. European officials and experts are concerned Moscow will supply weapons if stalled peace talks break down and Iran resumes strikes across the region. We've seen as of evidence of Russia helping Iran with its attacks, the British Defense Minister John Healey said in an April meeting of allies who are sending military support to Ukraine. He did not describe that evidence, but added Putin wanted us distracted by the conflict in the Middle East. Diplomatic ties. The Iranian war has strained some alliances, most notably between the Trump administration and Europe, where many leaders believe the conflict is unnecessary and unlawful. It has also set a worldwide scramble for energy supplies, with some countries turning to Russia for illicit but available oil and gas, and it has delayed the Russian-Ukraine peace process by diverting the United States' attention to the Middle East. I believe that they were drinking champagne in the Kremlin when President Trump started the war in Iran, said Danilo Lubkovitsky, director of the Kiev Security Forum and a former Ukrainian deputy foreign minister. But the war in Iran has also produced some surprising alliances, most evident in the new partnerships Ukraine has forged with Gulf states. In April, Ukraine announced new security agreements with Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Those kinds of ties would have been unlikely several years ago, when some of those Gulf states had previously sought to maintain neutral relations with Russia. Kiev wants to trade its drone technology and training assistance in return for Middle East diplomatic backing, energy deals, and advanced air defense systems, said Jana Kubazova, co-director of the European Security Program at the European Council on Foreign Relations. President Vladimir Zelensky is hoping to turn the crisis into an opportunity, she said. At least, Ms. Kubzova said, agreements with oil-rich states that include the sale of drone technology to them could prove lucrative to Ukraine's burgeoning defense industry. Europe has been a lifeline for Ukraine since the United States mostly stopped donating weapons and equipment to Kiev last year. Its countries have bought weapons from the United States to send to Ukraine, and last month the European Union unlocked a loan of 90 billion euros, about $106 billion, to keep Kiev endure the ongoing war. But Europe's ability to contain and continue to provide robust support may depend on whether the shortage of fuel and goods caused by the Iran war drags down European economies, a situation that would worsen if peace is not achieved. Ricardo Alcara, an expert at the Institute of International Affairs in Rome, said the continuing standoff over the Strait of Hormuz, a crucial shipping lane for 20% of the global energy supply, illustrated how Iran can pose as significant a threat to Europe as does the one on its doorstep in Ukraine. The Ukraine war is still Europe's main front, said Mr. Alcaro, whose research focuses on Europe and Iran, but the Iran war is not a secondary front in the sense that it is really impacting Europe's ability to contribute to the first priority, which is Ukraine. Fearing deportation, mothers give birth in shadows. Haitian women are having babies in squalid, unsupervised settings after the Dominican Republic started sending immigration agents to detain migrants at hospitals. Caddy Joseph, a Haitian woman living in the Dominican Republic, was afraid to go to the hospital to have her baby. She did not want to get deported. Dominican immigration officials stationed at public hospitals were detaining undocumented migrants who were then deported, including mothers and their newborns. The dragnet, underway for over a year, has overwhelmingly ensnared Haitians fleeing a catastrophic humanitarian crisis in neighboring Haiti. Miss Joseph, age 20, arrived in the Dominican Republic a year ago and was living in a back room of a car repair shop after the owner took her in. That is where, in late October, she said she gave birth. Propped on a blanket on the grease-stained floor, she said she pushed through the stifling Caribbean heat. With the help of a friend, Miss Joseph cut the umbilical cord herself with a razor, she said, but the baby didn't cry. Less than 24 hours later, he was dead, she said. It was a very difficult moment, Miss Joseph said in Creole, searching for words to describe her loss. The Dominican Republic is carrying out one of the most extensive mass deportation campaigns in the Western Hemisphere, expelling thousands of Haitians back to a country in shambles. The effort has extended to hospitals, a contentious move critics have denounced as inhumane and reflecting deep anti-Haitian sentiments on the island nation. Dominican officials described the hospital crackdown, which began in April 2025, as a crucial step to remove Haitians they say are draining public resources. By the government's metrics, the policy has worked. Deportations are up and the number of Haitians seeking hospital care is down. But over the past year, it has led a growing number of Haitian women to give birth at home or in other unsupervised and often squalid settings, according to medical professionals and local advocacy groups. They warn that mothers and infants face life-threatening risks, including infections and hemorrhages, without medical intervention. The fallout is clear. Hospital births among Haitian women dropped by nearly 60% in the 12 months since agents were deployed, to 13,856 from 32,967 in 2024, according to Dominican health statistics. It's been catastrophic, said William Charpentier, the president of the National Board for Migration and Refugees, a Dominican advocacy group assisting Haitian mothers. Over several months, the New York Times interviewed nearly a dozen Haitian mothers, as well as doctors and informal midwives, helping Haitian women give birth in the shadows. The Times documented the deaths of one newborn from medical complications and one mother who died of septic shock 2 weeks after delivering twin boys at home. Giving birth in the shadows, Miss Joseph said the owner of the car repair shop took her baby to a pediatrician 4 hours after the boy was born in Puerto Plata on the northern Dominican coast. The pediatrician, Dr. Juan Payero, said the baby's vital signs were stable, but he was concerned that the infant was hungry and had not cried. Dr. Payero said he urged Miss Joseph to go to a hospital, but the baby died a few hours later. Miss Joseph said she dug a hole and buried the baby's body herself on a hill near the town where she lived. An autopsy was never performed to determine the cause of death, she said. The baby, Dr. Payero suggested, could have died from malnourishment, lack of oxygen, an infection caused by the unhygienic conditions in which he was delivered, or tetanus from the razor used to cut the umbilical cord. The crisis is the latest flashpoint in decades of tension on Hispaniola, the Caribbean island shared by Haiti and the Dominican Republic. The Dominican economy has long relied on Haitian migration to power its agricultural, construction, and tourism industries, but the recent surge triggered a backlash. Tens of thousands of Haitians have crossed the 240-mile land border in recent years, escaping relentless bloodshed and deprivation in one of the most unstable countries in the Americas. The Dominican government responded with a far-reaching deportation campaign, supported by many Dominicans worried that Haiti's gang violence would spill over the border and that the exodus was burdening taxpayers. President Luis Abinader, tapping into a wave of nationalism that fueled his re-election in 2024, imposed weekly deportation quotas that have led to the expulsion of more than 478,000 Haitians since January 2025, including border crossers deported multiple times, according to Dominican officials. The last government survey from 2017 estimated that nearly 500,000 Haitians lived in the Dominican Republic, with an additional 252,000 born in the Dominican Republic to Haitian parents. Mr. Abinader oversaw the construction of a 100-mile border fence surveilled by soldiers and sensors, but his most divisive move took aim at places traditionally considered sanctuaries, hospitals. In April 2025, the government began requiring the island's public hospitals to report patients without proper documentation to immigration authorities so that they could be detained and deported after receiving care. Not even the Trump administration has enacted similar measures at U.S. hospitals as part of its deportation campaign. Dominican officials said the move was necessary to prevent overcrowding in hospitals they described as inundated by Haitian migrants. Vice Admin Louis Raphael Lee Ballister, the general director of migration, said he was unaware of any spike in at-home births among Haitian women. He stressed that undocumented Haitians face deportation only after receiving and paying for medical care in hospitals. Under current protocols, mothers are detained 72 hours after giving a natural birth, while those who undergo C-sections are detained after 7 days. We've seen ourselves obligated to take a series of measures for national security and to guarantee the safety of our citizens, Admiral Lee Ballister said in an interview, adding that officials were acting with a high degree of professionalism and respect for human dignity. The policy which has resulted in the deportation of breastfeeding mothers and their infants has been denounced by human rights organizations and the United Nations, with a top UN official in Haiti saying it raised serious humanitarian and human rights concerns. Christiana Louise, the president of the Movement of Dominican Haitian Women, an advocacy group, said it's an affront to the human dignity of women and their girls and boys. Twins orphaned at birth. Over the past year, fear of deportation to their crisis-ridden homeland has kept many Haitians from seeking medical care. Last November, Lynline Polis, age 28, gave birth to twins, Duliason and Dulekia, in a house under construction where she was living without permission. According to her family, she refused to go to a hospital for fear of being deported and was alone during the delivery until a midwife arrived later to help cut the umbilical cords, her family said. She quickly became ill and began to bleed profusely from her pelvis, according to family members and neighbors interviewed by the Times. Neighbors said they pulled 4,500 pesos, or $75, to send her to a private health clinic where she was treated for high blood pressure. The next day, Miss Polios collapsed and died on a sidewalk in Santo Domingo, the country's capital. Her family said her autopsy report, conducted by Dominican officials and reviewed by the Times, found that she had died from septic shock, septicemia, and endometriosis, a uterine infection that is a leading cause of postpartum death. The orphan twins are now in the care of their father's family. A new crop of midwives. The spike in at-home births has revived a cottage industry of parteras, or midwives, who were common decades ago but had largely disappeared as the Dominican Republic moved toward a hospital-based maternity system. Kenya DeGraff, age 28, a year-old community activist, said that since becoming a midwife last year, she has crisscrossed the island helping more than 24 Haitian women give birth, never charging them a fee. Right now, many Haitians here don't have money, Ms. DeGraff said, referring to the high cost to give birth at private hospitals to avoid immigration officials. Are you going to let someone die because of money? The Times late last year visited the house of another midwife in northern Dominican Republic, crowded with 6 Haitian women. The midwife said she charged $100 to $250 for her services, from simply cutting the umbilical cord to providing traditional steam baths, which can help soothe new mothers. Dominicans don't know I do this at home, said the midwife, who requested anonymity out of fear that Dominican officials could deport the woman she helps. Islan Luis, age 21, was visiting the midwife's house after giving birth 2 days earlier because she did not have the $2,000 she said it cost to give birth at a private hospital. Miss Louise said she had gone to shower in her home and felt a pain in her hip. When she suddenly went into labor in the bathroom, the baby was born immediately after I felt the pain, said Miss Louise, who was still suffering from abdominal pain but had not yet seen a doctor. After 17 hours of labor at the midwife's house, another Haitian woman, who requested anonymity out of concern that she could be identified and deported, rushed to a public hospital to give birth. The Times accompanied the woman and her husband to the hospital, where they said they paid a $250 bribe to avoid being reported to immigration authorities, on top of the roughly $85 for the hospital care. Shortly after giving birth, she said she had to share a bed with another Haitian mother and both of their babies. Nearby, she added, Dominican mothers cuddled their babies in their own individual beds. This report was produced with the support of the International Women's Media Foundation, IWMF, as part of the Reproductive Health, Rights and Justice in the Americas initiative. The Times retained full editorial control over the article, and funders do not review stories before publication. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. China is testing its state surveillance model abroad. The first sign that something unusual was unfolding in the Solomon Islands was when the Chinese police showed up at Fighter 1, a quiet village ringed with banana trees. The Chinese officers gathered villagers on a grassy patch and proposed a system that they said would help keep them safe. They suggested that the residents fill out cards providing the names, addresses, and dates of birth for each household member. They recommended collecting fingerprints and palm prints, both highly unusual and legally dubious in a country lacking laws governing personal data collection. Under China's leader Xi Jinping, Beijing has tried to export its ideas about security to the world in countries like the Solomon Islands, a Pacific nation 3,000 miles away, where Washington offers treaties that commit American troops to defend U.S. allies against external threats. Beijing offers something different: equipment and tactics for governments to keep order at home. That pitch has appealed to many authoritarian and weak democratic states in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Central Asia that view domestic threats to regime security as an equal, if not bigger, priority than fielding an army. But the Solomon Islands, which had signed a security pact with China in 2022, is also emerging as an early test of the limits of China's efforts. China's policing in the Solomon Islands has gone hand in hand with the growth of its mining and other businesses and the need for Beijing to protect its interests overseas. The effort is more than just about technology and policing tactics. It is as much about spreading an ideology centered on state control. When they visited Fighter 1, the Chinese police were responding to a request from the community to help keep rowdy young men and boys from coming to their village at night and getting buzzed on betel nut and a potent moonshine called Quaso. Their solution was to introduce an obscure Mao-era community surveillance system, the Fenkuo Experience, named after Fenkuo town in eastern China. The system encouraged neighbors to spy and snitch on one another to root out political enemies. The system has been revived under Mr. Xi as part of a push to snuff out any challenges to the Chinese Communist Party. In China, the system calls for the police to monitor individual households in sprawling apartment complexes, in one example assigning each unit a color code that denoted whether occupants presented a security risk. The police have also visited the homes of minority groups like the Tibetans and Uyghurs to promote party policies. Government workers have listed churches to give anti-cult lectures, and companies are required to register their employees in police databases. The idea of introducing such a heavy-handed style of state surveillance in the Solomon Islands alarmed local politicians and observers in nearby countries like Australia, who worried it could give the government the tools to stifle freedoms. The Fenkuo pilot was suspended after an outcry, and the election this month of Matthew Whale, a prime minister who has historically been skeptical of Beijing, raises questions about China's foothold in the country and whether its ideas travel as easily as the party hopes. A model police state. China has cast itself as a model of policing for other countries to emulate, pointing to low rates of violent crime as proof of its success. But the vast security apparatus that keeps citizens safe is frequently deployed to crush political dissent. From the start, each citizen is assigned a household registration card that restricts where the person can live. Movement within the country is monitored by a growing network of surveillance cameras, many of which are equipped with artificial intelligence software that can recognize not only faces but also the way a person walks. In once restive areas of China, like the western region of Xinjiang, millions of Uyghurs have been subjected to biometric data harvesting that included giving DNA samples, iris scans, and voice pattern samples, All of this is necessary in the eyes of the party, which sees its legitimacy as tied to its ability to preserve social order. Countries with like minded governments have been welcoming the opportunity to use China's assistance to entrench their power. When Vietnam's leader To Lam visited Beijing this year, the government's pledge to work closely to safeguard political security. Mr. Xi told Mr. Lam that they shared an interest in defending the ruling position of the Communist Party. With Cambodia, China pledged in April to work on jointly resisting external infiltration and preventing color revolutions, code for pro-democracy movements, or popular uprisings that Beijing views as Western-backed plots to destabilize one-party rule. China is training police forces in many developing countries. Since 2000, it has held nearly 900 training sessions, including on counterterrorism, riot control, and border control for at least 138 countries, according to a study by the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. China is trying to rewrite the standards of what global security is and which countries are the best at providing it, said Sheena Chestnut-Greetens, a political scientist at the University of Texas at Austin and one of the authors of the Carnegie Report. It has embedded its officers and police forces in the Central African Republic and the Pacific Island nations of Vanuatu and Kiribati. It provided thousands of surveillance cameras to Ecuador in 2011 that enabled the country's domestic intelligence agency to better monitor political opponents. And it trained a unit of South African police in 2016 that was later deployed to intimidate and assassinate political rivals of then-President Jacob Zuma. According to the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, a Washington-based organization that is part of the U.S. Department of Defense, China may be seeking to improve the global public image of its authoritarian model by exporting its police training. It allows China to portray their system as a public safety success rather than a human rights failure, Professor Greetens said. A Pacific laboratory, China scored its biggest victory in the Solomon Islands in 2019 when the government there severed decades of diplomatic ties with Taiwan in favor of recognizing Beijing. That opened the floodgates for Chinese financial support, trade, and investment. The switch, as the change is referred to by residents, raised concerns in Australia, the United States, and other Western allies about Beijing encroaching on their traditional sphere of influence. It also inflamed long-standing tensions between residents of the more developed island of Guadalcanal, the site of the capital, Honiara, and those from the poorer island of Maulita, which had maintained close ties to Taiwan through farming and medical programs. Those tensions erupted into deadly riots in 2021 that targeted Honiara's more than century-old Chinese community, who represent less than 2% of the city's population of about 170,000, but dominate storefronts selling household goods, groceries, and alcohol, and also control lucrative logging and mining interests. Protesters, mainly migrants from Maulita, tried to storm the personal residence of the prime minister at the time, Manasa Sagavari. The unrest prompted Mr. Sagavari to sign the security pact with Beijing the following year, justifying it as a way to combat hard internal threats. He also dismissed his country's traditional security partner, Australia, as inadequate. A copy of the pact has never been publicly released, but excerpts leaked online show that the agreement allows the Solomon Islands to request that China send police, armed police, military personnel, and other law enforcement and armed forces to restore social order and protect Chinese personnel and projects in the country. Australia also has a security agreement with the Solomon Islands, though its focus has shifted in recent years from maintaining law and order toward providing police training. Beijing embedded its first batch of police in the Royal Solomon Island Police Force in 2022. Around the same time, China donated riot gear worth $1.5 million that included bulletproof vests, shields, helmets, and stab-resistant suits and gloves. Photographs on the Solomon Islands government website show Chinese police training local police how to wield batons and anti-riot forks, a tool commonly seen in China that is about the length of a pitchfork with a U-shaped prong to pin down a subject. The presence of the Chinese police is just another example of how Beijing is advancing its interests in a country that lacks the power and clout to say no, says Peter Candelaria Jr., who was a longtime opposition politician when we interviewed him last year in Honiara, and now is the new Prime Minister's cabinet overseeing national planning. He argued that the power imbalance has also allowed Chinese firms in mining and timber, two of the Solomon Islands' biggest industries, to raise forests and pollute rivers with mining runoff, while using illegal ports to evade government fees with little consequence. The Chinese come and do their own thing, said Mr. Candelaria, who opposed the switch from Taiwan to Beijing and whose father was the Solomon Islands' first leader after gaining independence. It's like open season. The China Police Liaison Team, as they are formally called, operate out of the Rove Police Headquarters in Honiara, a humid, weather-beaten capital city where diesel fumes from the vehicles that clog the lone highway hang heavy in the air. Beijing's presence stands out among the rows of low-slung concrete and corrugated steel buildings. There's a Chinese-built sports stadium and a hospital. Chinese foremen working for Chinese state-owned construction companies are supervising the paving of roads. Chinese people run hair salons, massage parlors, and restaurants, serving dim sum and hot pot. The 10 or so members of the Chinese police team are seconded in the Solomon Islands for months on end before being rotated out. They seem to keep largely to themselves. Members of the Chinese community who spoke to the Times said they did not recall seeing the police around much. The police team has been held up by Chinese state propaganda as an example of the country's benevolence towards its neighbors as a regional power. The People's Public Security University of China, a national police university, published an article in 2024 describing the officers as roughing it so that poor villagers could benefit from the wisdom of the Fen Kuo experience. Team members suffered from infections because of a lack of medical care in remote areas. Their rooms were infested with mosquitoes, centipedes, rats, and cockroaches. They ate mostly bread, biscuits, and locally produced cassava. At the same time, the Solomon Islands government website has been filled with news releases showing Chinese police shaking hands with local officials, donating clothes and sports equipment to villagers, serving tea to university students, putting on drone shows and kung fu demonstrations, and holding PowerPoint presentations. Analysts say the support helps address a shortage of resources, but it was unclear if China's influx of aid would benefit the Solomon Islands over the long term. Virginia Kamali, head of the Pacific Program at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, who was co-authored a recent report on Chinese policing and interviewed residents of Fighter One, found instances in which donated Chinese police vehicles had sat idle because there was not enough money or fuel, or there were no spare parts to repair them. They're getting lots of donations, but the crux of the matter is always, is this sustainable? Ms. Kamali said. Other donations from China include 2 police speedboats valued at over $400,000, an anti-riot vehicle equipped with a water cannon, and equipment to open a forensic autopsy laboratory. Some residents say they are willing to give China a chance. Anything, they say, is better than the status quo in the Solomon Islands, which the United Nations has named one of the 44 least developed countries in the world. We've been depending on different countries for so long, yet nothing has improved, said Jacqueline Mully, 43, a resident of Tahashi B, a hilltop community of makeshift homes in Guadalcanal that was visited by the Chinese police team last summer. Miss Malia, who wore a second-hand t-shirt that read China Fantastic, is agnostic about what flag the police fly. Whether government Whichever government that helps and makes this country work better, I'll go with, she said. The backlash when the news emerged that the Chinese police team had visited Fighter 1 and proposed collecting fingerprints and other data, some Solomon Islanders expressed concerns. Celsus Talufulu, who is now serving as a special secretary to the new prime minister, wrote a blog post arguing that the police had no authority to collect vast amounts of personal information, register individual biometric data, or conduct neighborhood surveillance. Mr. Talufulu wrote that the Fen Kuo model's emphasis on monitoring and coercion threatened social harmony and local customs, such as having village chiefs resolve conflicts and disputes. This is against our norms, he said in an interview in Honiara. People will not take lightly to being spied on by their neighbors. In Australia, a newspaper ran an editorial criticizing the Chinese police team's actions in the Solomon Islands. Security analysts at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute wrote that the risk is that the Solomon Islands becomes a proving ground for authoritarian practices under the guise of community service. China's propaganda organs pushed back. The Global Times described Western reactions as the discomfort of formal colonial powers whose exclusive influence in the Pacific is no longer assured. It also said China was not imposing the Fen Kuo model on the Solomon Islands. It was merely offering it up as something to consider. The Solomon Island police issued a statement on Facebook asserting that the Fen Kuo pilot program was locally led and not introduced at the behest of China. It denied that the program was about surveillance or coercion and said no data would be transferred to any foreign authority. The Solomon Islands police and the Chinese embassy in Honiara did not respond to requests for interviews. Following the furor, the Fen Kuo pilot program at Fighter 1 was suspended. No biometric data was ever shared. The noisy youth remain a problem. Some residents said they would still welcome having the Chinese police play a role in their community, which houses some of Honiara's professional elite, including lawyers, judges, and doctors. We are open-minded, said Pedagal Tokami, age 42, an emergency room doctor who built his two-story home, shaded with trees, from scratch after purchasing a plot of land in Fighter 1 in 2013 when there were no roads leading to the village. Mr. Togame said the local police are so short on staff that they cannot be relied upon to show up. If giving his fingerprints to the Chinese police team would help end the nightly nuisance, he would gladly oblige. We just want a peaceful community, Mr. Togame said. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. It's still spring in Europe, but the heat is already breaking records. Authorities in Britain and France warned that unprecedented temperatures at a time when few expected them could persist. Climate change has made heat waves more frequent and more intense. Lines of Londoners outside public pools and ponds, water mist dousing tennis spectators at the French Open, commuters packed in stifling public transportation, and summer hasn't even started. Several countries in Western Europe baked under record-breaking heat this week, far earlier than normal, prompting governments to warn about health risks. Heat waves in Europe have become more frequent and more severe in recent years, and scientists have repeatedly attributed that to a rise in global temperatures driven mainly by the burning of coal, oil, and gas. One study by climate scientists on Tuesday concluded that the extraordinary temperature spikes are primarily attributed to human-driven climate change. In France, 7 people died in circumstances linked to the heat wave since Saturday, officials said. In Britain, 3 teenagers drowned in separate incidences, the police said. The unseasonable temperatures came after an abnormally hot 2025 in Europe. Temperatures recorded on Monday at Kew Gardens in Greater London climbed to 34.8 degrees Celsius, or nearly 95 degrees Fahrenheit, provisionally setting a record for the highest May temperature and the highest temperatures ever recorded during meteorological springtime, which covers March to May. The new record didn't last long. On Tuesday, temperatures climbed to 35.1 degrees Celsius, or 95.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Too hot for me is how Sam Worth, age 34, described it as he joined a long line of people seeking a respite at a public pool in London. Britain's official weather service described the latest heat as unprecedented for the time of year. The previous record of 32.8 degrees Celsius, just over 91 degrees Fahrenheit, stood for decades after being recorded in 1922 and 1944. By Tuesday, the majority of England and Wales were officially in what Britain defines as a heat wave. I'm very glad we're not teaching this week because the children would be struggling, Phoebe Thompson, a schoolteacher in London, said. Schools are on midterm break in Britain this week, but they may have to consider loosening uniform rules and administering exams in air-conditioned rooms if the heat continues, Ms. Thompson said. Many in Britain live without air conditioning. The average high temperatures for May in the country hover at around 15 degrees Celsius or 59 degrees Fahrenheit, meaning the heat wave hit when few would expect it. Extreme heat can lead to heat strokes, and people with chronic conditions like hypertension and kidney disease are especially vulnerable. The UK Health Security Agency issued an amber heat health alert, the second highest level warning of significant effects across health and social care services, including a rise in deaths, particularly among seniors. Our ability to control temperature is much less efficient, Lucia Daniels, 72, said after dipping into her local pool. She was careful to stay in the shade on her walk home, where she planned to spend the rest of the day like a lizard, with curtains drawn and windows closed. Parts of western France broke heat records for May on Monday, according to the National Weather Service, which warned that temperatures were expected to remain high through the rest of the week. Temperatures over the weekend climbed as much as 13 degrees Celsius or 23.4 degrees Fahrenheit above seasonal norms, the National Weather Service said, adding that it was remarkable for being so early, intense, and prolonged. 7 people in the country have died directly or indirectly because of the current heat wave, including 5 drownings, Maud Brigon, the French government spokeswoman, told the TF1 news channel. At the French Open in Paris, players endured stifling heat on the court and spectators tried to cool off with water misters. Celine Yacoao, 49, a clerk at the Paris court, said she had to commute on a stuffy train with inconsistent cooling and wished she would work from home. It's suffocating, she said. We don't sleep. We struggle to get hydrated. Across Spain, a country no stranger to scorching temperatures, an unusually early heat wave has left locals struggling. Temperatures in the southwest are forecast to reach 40 degrees Celsius in the coming days. In the central city of Valladolid, there was a sea of empty outdoor tables, usually a site reserved for the height of the summer. As people avoided the sun, and in Madrid, the capital, residents were bracing for an early summer. It looks like we are deep in July, said Angeles Ruiz, age 60, a nurse sheltering from the broiling heat in the shade of an empty Plaza de Olavide with 2 of her grandchildren. Mr. Ruiz, age 60, said that climate change was upending an old Spanish saying that you shouldn't pack away your winter clothes until the 40th of May, meaning early June. Well, that saying makes no sense anymore, she said. Elsewhere, Asia has been grappling with record-breaking heat as well. Daytime temperatures were above 45 degrees Celsius or 113 degrees Fahrenheit across central and northern India over the past 2 weeks. In Pakistan, temperatures through Thursday are forecast to be up 6 degrees Celsius or 10.8 degrees Fahrenheit above seasonal averages. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. They've heard the warnings. Gen Z is tanning anyway. Dermatologists are flummoxed. Like many 19-year-olds of her generation, Makai Wallace from South Jordan, Utah, cares deeply about her friends, her skincare routine, and staying healthy. She also loves a good viral moment on TikTok, but she was surprised to be the face of one after she posted from inside a tanning bed in October. Her video, which amassed over 71,000 views, provoked numerous concerned reactions from the medical community. The lioness does not concern herself with skin cancer, Ms. Wallace wrote in her post, sticking her tongue out and squinting from the ultraviolet light. Dr. Brooke Jeffrey, a dermatologist in Scottsdale, Arizona, who worked at a tanning salon as a teenager, was one of the doctors who posted a response. Tanning beds are in the same cancer-causing category as asbestos and plutonium, she said in the video, adding that using one before age 35 increases your risk for melanoma by 75%. That's 7-5, she said. Miss Wallace's casual shrug at the risks of tanning echoes a surprisingly common attitude among Gen Zers. Many keep tabs on the UV index, checking weather apps to determine when they can get the most ultraviolet exposure. Tan influencers, as some social media users call themselves, are posting about tan maxing, witch carrot extract enhancers, or showing off tan lines and sunburns after a day soaking up the rays. A new survey on sun habits from the American Academy of Dermatology found that only 25% of Gen Z respondents ages 18 to 29 reported concern about developing skin cancer in their lifetime, compared with 39% of the general population. What's more, 20% said that getting a tan was more important than preventing skin cancer, compared with 14% of the overall group. Experts say young people could be actively defying the warnings about sun exposure. After all, many grew up hearing them from parents, doctors, and in some cases school programs, or they could be unsure what to believe, a product of the misinformation promoted on social media and from public figures like Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who uses tanning beds. The Food and Drug Administration recently withdrew a proposal that would have banned them for minors. Either way, experts are confounded. Young people are not smoking, not drinking, and they're prioritizing their health in terms of sleep and hydration and exercise and all of these things that we know are established, said Dr. Neelam Khan, a dermatologist in Washington, D.C. I would have hoped that the concept of tanning would have been a part of that. Where it just became uncool, she continued. All of it is concerning, but the very risk of them developing skin cancer is the most concerning. A cynical stance on the sun. Skin cancer is the most common type of cancer in the United States, yet it is also one of the most preventable. According to the Skin Cancer Foundation, 1 in 5 Americans will develop skin cancer by the age of 70, and having 5 or more sunburns doubles someone's risk for melanoma. Dr. Marissa Garshik, a dermatologist who practices in New York City and New Jersey, says that when patients in their 70s come in with skin cancers, I tell them, no, don't worry, you didn't do anything wrong. We didn't know then what we know now. But today, she noted, it's different because we have a knowledge of the different measures that we can take to protect ourselves. That knowledge doesn't appear to be connecting very well with Gen Z. In an October TikTok post, a user wrote, the sun gives you cancer, sunscreen gives you cancer. We die either way, so you may as well be a tanned XX. There is no scientific evidence that sunscreen causes skin cancer. Some teenagers express a reduced sense of agency over the future, said Lindsay Fleming, a licensed therapist in Illinois who specializes in young adults. When the future feels uncertain, long-term consequences lose their emotional weight. In a 2024 American Academy of Dermatology survey, 25% of Gen Z respondents said it was worth looking great with a tan now, even if it meant looking worse later. Misinformation is rampant too. The false claim that sunscreen causes skin cancer has convinced many young people, including Ms. Wallace, not to use it at all. Other myths show, such as how tanning your perineum can boost energy and balance hormones, or how eliminating seed oils from your diet will protect you from the sun, have also fed into Gen Z tanning culture. In the new AAD survey, Gen Z respondents cited TikTok or Instagram as their number one source for skincare information, and 65% of them were likely to believe tanning myths, including that a base tan can prevent sunburn or reduce the risk of skin cancer. Many young patients are highly informed about skincare and incorporate elaborate routines into their daily routine, said Anne Faircius, a dermatology nurse practitioner in Chico, California. What concerns me most is not a lack of information, she added, but that the messaging isn't always resonating, or that there is mixed information about how much sun exposure is safe. Ms. Frisia said her younger patients regularly complained about the size of their pores or asked about preventative Botox. They all want glass skin, but will go and fry in a tanning bed, which only makes pores enlarge, she said. Every tan is DNA damage. The tanfluencer effect. Ms. Fleming emphasized how a normalization of reckless sun habits on TikTok and Instagram influences this generation. When teens see peers, not just celebrities, engaging in tanning behaviors, it feels more accessible and less risky, she said. There's also a lack of visible long-term consequences in these spaces, which skews risk perception, she added. As young men and women increasingly look to influencers for guidance, it has also fostered mistrust in the medical field. I am not going to say Western medicine is a fraud. It's gotten us so far, said Mitchell Sarin, age 25, an Olympic fencer for the United States, who regularly posts health and wellness content, including medically unproven sun advice, to his 169,000 followers on Instagram. Mr. Saran often works for his laptop outdoors, cycling between shade and sun, which he believes helps him maximize the benefits of UV light. In terms of health as a whole, I'm more likely to listen to my own body, he said. Whole body health is also important to Dr. Khan, the dermatologist in Washington. Her recommendations for sun exposure echo those from the World Health Organization, American Cancer Society, and American Academy of Dermatology. Specifically, she advises limiting direct sun exposure, especially between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. or when the UV index is 3 or higher. She also recommends getting 5 to 15 minutes of sun exposure daily for vitamin D, wearing protective clothing and a hat when out in the sun, applying sunscreen with an SPF of 30 or higher every day, and seeing a dermatologist for an annual skin checkup. But those recommendations are not what's going viral, Dr. Khan said. Instead, it's kind of these more controversial, reactive ways of thinking. Miss Wallace remains unmoved for now. My opinion is the sun is good for you, she said. Maybe I'll eat my words one day, but I'm just not worried about skin cancer. The $400 million showdown between a billionaire and a California mayor. The owner of the Los Angeles Rams and the city of Inglewood are in dispute over Hollywood Park and SoFi Stadium, which is about to host the World Cup matches. SoFi Stadium was hailed as one of the world's premier sporting venues when it opened in Inglewood, California in 2020. And to the city's delight, the owner of the Los Angeles Rams, E. Stanley Kroenke, and his development group paid for the $5 billion project without government funding. But 6 years later, as Inglewood and Mr. Kroenke prepared to host the first men's World Cup match in the United States in 32 years, the monogamy between the partners is being tested. Hollywood Park, shorthand for Mr. Kroenke's 300-acre retail office and residential development that includes SoFi Stadium, is demanding roughly $400 million as reimbursement for improvements it made to its property in the surrounding area, citing the development agreement it struck with the city in 2015. Inglewood is pushing back, arguing that the agreement is void because of a subsequent state court decision that invalidates agreements adopted by voter initiative. Once SoFi Stadium and Hollywood Park reopened, they become a magnet for more development. A new metro line, the billionaire Steve Ballmer's Intuit Dome, and the rebranding of a remodeled Kia Forum. Everyone and everything, a Super Bowl, Bad Bunny, a fire aid benefit, have filled the venues, attracting fans from across the nation and locals from all around town. When the world arrives in Los Angeles for the 2028 Summer Olympics, SoFi Stadium will host two of the most high-profile events, the opening ceremony and the swimming competitions. Mr. Kroenke's development turned the city's fortunes around, his lawyers have argued in court documents which say that Inglewood's unemployment rate has dropped roughly a dozen percentage points to 4.7%, and the real estate values have doubled. Those lawyers say that if Inglewood prevails in this dispute, it could affect other developments in California. If the city's agreements can now be revisited or undone after years of economic growth and community benefit, Otto Moy, managing director of Hollywood Park and president of Kroenke Holdings, said in a statement, it raises fundamental questions about the reliability of doing business in Inglewood and California generally. The city's lawyers have emphasized in court documents that billionaires are not above the law and dispute the amount that Mr. Kroenke and his group say must be reimbursed for improvements to public infrastructure like roads, sewer lines, and streetlights. Either way, Inglewood's mayor, James T. Butts Jr., said the city cannot pay because the development agreement it signed is invalid. Hollywood Park has also sued Inglewood over digital signage that a city contractor erected near the development's property, claiming that the advertisements could conflict with its own inside its grounds. The legal disputes, a hearing in the billboard case is scheduled for Friday, should not affect the fans attending events in Hollywood Park, only the finances of the two sides. This is basic 101 civics, Mr. Butts said in an interview. Cities can legislate and do things in the public interest, even if someone else feels it is harmful to their financial bottom line. The legal tussle is a reminder that no stadium deal is ever truly free and that billionaire sports owners can throw their weight around when host cities stand in their path. Glendale, Arizona has fought with the Arizona Cardinals over who should pay for services like traffic control at the State Farm Stadium. The borough of East Rutherford, New Jersey, complained about paying police officers overtime at MetLife Stadium. Mr. Konecki's NFL team was previously based in St. Louis, and there he claimed that the operators of the team's stadium, the Edward Jones Dome, failed to maintain the building adequately. After the Rams moved to Los Angeles, the city and county of St. Louis sued Mr. Konecki and the NFL, accusing them of ignoring their own relocation guidelines. The NFL paid $790 million to settle the suit. Sports and Spectacle in Inglewood, a South Los Angeles city a few miles from Los Angeles International Airport, date to the Hollywood Park racetrack, which opened in 1938, and the Forum, which was the home of NBA Lakers and the NHL's Kings. Their success led Inglewood to adopt the moniker City of Champions. But in 1999, the Lakers and the Kings moved to downtown Los Angeles. By 2011, Inglewood was on the brink of bankruptcy, barely able to pay its employees, and suffering from 17% unemployment, according to court documents. Then came Mr. Konecki, a Missouri real estate mogul whose wife is an heiress to the Walmart empire. By filing for a 2015 ballot initiative, he accelerated the process that would allow for the construction of a stadium in Inglewood. Mr. Millay said Hollywood Park had brought to Inglewood and the greater region billions of dollars in private investment and tens of millions of dollars annually in tax revenue, and some residents acknowledged the benefits. Corolla Fellows, who owns a 3-bedroom home near Hollywood Park, said the house's value has risen from $133,000 in 1988 to nearly $1 million today. Leslie Jones, a lifelong Inglewood resident, revels in the fact that she has twice walked from her home to see Beyonce. Beats $125 parking, she said. Even Mr. Malley said he and his associates recognize that a project of this scale brings change and can impact issues like traffic and housing, which he called legitimate issues that cities, developers, and community leaders all have a responsibility to address. Miss Jones recalled that after working a late night at her wine bar in town, her 2-mile trip home took almost 90 minutes because of the Taylor Swift and her Eras tour had arrived at SoFi Stadium. Monstrosities, Miss Fellows calls them. This dispute between Inglewood and Hollywood Park, in fact, started with digital signs. One near the 405 freeway has been promoting Jaws-themed lottery tickets. A jellyfish floats on the digital display of another. I don't consider this as like a Death Race 2000 thing, he said, referring to a dystopian cult movie in which drivers mow down pedestrians for sport. But basically, this is a business disagreement. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the May 27th issue of New York Times. Your reader has been Claudia, and I thank you for listening.